3 billionaires, 7 top-tier child psychologists, 4 nannies fired in a single week. Gabriel Santoro, the most feared man on the East Coast, could buy entire cities, but he couldn't buy the one thing he needed most: his children's voices. His triplets, Matteo, Luca, and Nico, hadn't uttered a single syllable since the night their mother was murdered in front of them 2 years ago. They were silent ghosts in a violent world. That is, until a broke, exhausted waitress at a diner did something no doctor ever thought of. She didn't speak to them. She didn't bribe them. She just left a strange red mark on a plate, and for the first time in 700 days the silence broke. But that mark didn't just open their mouths. It opened a door to a past Gabriel thought he had buried, and a secret that could kill them all. The rain in Manhattan didn't wash the grime away. It just made it slicker. Gabriel Santoro adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Brioni suit, staring out the tinted window of his armored Cadillac Escalade. He was 32 years old, the head of the Santoro crime syndicate, and he was currently terrified of entering a family restaurant on the Upper West Side. "We're here, boss," his driver, distinctively known as Big Sal Rossi, grunted from the front. Gabriel sighed, running a hand through thick, dark hair that was starting to show the first threads of stress-induced grey. "Are they calm?" "They're quiet, boss, like always." That was the problem. Matteo, Luca, and Nico were 4 years old. They looked like angels, dark curls, olive skin, and eyes that held a terrifying intelligence. But they were silent. Not the silence of well-behaved children, but the heavy, suffocating silence of trauma. 2 years ago, a car bomb intended for Gabriel had taken his wife, Isabella. The boys had been in the back seat, miraculously shielded by the chassis, but they had seen everything. Since that day, 0 words. Gabriel opened the door. The security detail, 3 men in plain clothes, flanned out. He unbuckled the triplets one by one. They didn't struggle. They didn't cry. They just stared at him with those haunting, dark eyes. "Pizza tonight," Gabriel said, forcing a cheerfulness he didn't feel, "and maybe ice cream if you eat the crust." Matteo, the oldest by 3 minutes, blinked. Luca looked at his shoes. Nico, the sensitive one, gripped Gabriel's pant leg with a fist so tight his knuckles were white. They entered Luigi's, a high-end Italian spot that Gabriel didn't own, which was why he liked it. He wanted neutral ground. The host, a nervous man named Arthur, practically tripped over his own feet to greet them. "Mr. Santoro, Mr. Santoro, right this way. We cleared the back section. Just for you." "No, I didn't ask you to clear the section," Gabriel said, his voice low but carrying that gravelly edge that made grown men sweat. "I want them to be around normal people. Put us in a booth near the window." "Oh, of course." They were seated. The disaster started 3 minutes later. It wasn't a tantrum in the traditional sense. The Santoro triplets didn't scream. They dismantled. When the waiter brought the water, Luca silently swept the glass onto the floor. Smash! When the busboy tried to clean it, Matteo took a fork and stabbed the table, dragging it through the expensive linen cloth, ripping it down the center. Nico just sat there, holding his breath until his face turned purple, a silent protest that terrified Gabriel more than the violence. "Boys, stop!" Gabriel hissed, grabbing Matteo's wrist. "Enough!" Matteo looked at his father, his expression flat, and dropped the fork. The restaurant went quiet. Patrons were staring. A woman in pearls whispered something about savages. Gabriel shot her a look that made her choke on her wine. "I can't do this," Gabriel muttered to himself, loosening his tie. He was the most powerful man in New York, controlling shipping docks in Jersey and construction contracts in Brooklyn, yet he was powerless against 3 4-year-olds. "Excuse me?" A soft voice broke his spiral. Gabriel looked up. It wasn't their usual waiter. It was a waitress he hadn't seen before. She looked tired. Her uniform was a size too big, her apron stained with tomato sauce near the pocket. She had messy brown hair tied back in a hasty bun and eyes that were a startling, piercing green, intelligence masked by exhaustion. Her name tag read Sienna. "I think they're overstimulated," she said, not looking at Gabriel, but at the boys. "The lights are flickering above this table. It's subtle, but if you have sensory processing issues, it feels like a strobe light." Gabriel looked up. The vintage bulb was indeed buzzing slightly. He hadn't noticed. "I'm sorry about the mess," Gabriel said, his hand instinctively reaching for his money clip. "I'll pay for the tablecloth and the glass." "Put your money away," Sienna said sharply. She didn't sound scared of him, which was the first twist of the night. People were always scared of Gabriel Santoro. They aren't acting out because they're bad. They're acting out because they're trying to say something and they can't. She knelt down, right on the dirty floor, amidst the shattered glass. "Hey," she whispered to Nico, who was still holding his breath. "Breathe." She didn't touch him. She just tapped her own chest, a rhythmic thump, 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 thump. Nico watched her. Slowly he exhaled. "I'm going to bring you something," Sienna said to the boys. "Not food, just a plate. Is that okay?" The triplets stared at her. For the first time all night, they weren't looking at the exit. They were looking at her. Gabriel watched her walk away. "Who is she?" he asked Big Sal, who was hovering by the bar. "New girl, Sienna Brooks, started 2 weeks ago. Clean record, lived in foster care mostly. Nothing interesting." "She noticed the light," Gabriel murmured. "Nobody notices the light." Sienna returned 5 minutes later. She didn't have a notepad. She carried a single, large, white dinner plate. There was no food on it. She placed it in the center of the table. "What is this?" Gabriel asked, brow furrowed. "They're hungry, but they won't eat." Showing them an empty plate is— "Shh," she shushed him. She actually shushed the Don of New York. Sienna reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a small squeeze bottle of balsamic glaze, the thick, dark kind used for garnishing fancy desserts. "You guys like stories?" she asked the boys. Silence. "I like stories," she said, "but I don't like telling them with my mouth. I like telling them with this." She leaned over the plate. Her hand moved with lightning speed, confident and fluid. She wasn't just drizzling sauce. She was drawing. Within 10 seconds, she had created a shape. It wasn't a smiley face. It wasn't a car. It was a sparrow. But not just a bird. It was a sparrow caught in a cage. But the cage door was open. The detail was absurd for a squeeze bottle. The feathers were jagged, the cage bars stark. Then she did the strange part. She took a bottle of ketchup from the table, dipped her pinky finger into it, and placed a single, distinct red dot on the sparrow's throat. The atmosphere at the table shifted instantly. The air left the room. Matteo stood up on the booth seat. Luca's eyes went wide, his mouth opening slightly. Nico began to tremble. Gabriel stiffened, his hand moving toward the pistol holstered under his jacket. Was this a threat? The red mark on the throat? "What the hell did you just draw?" Gabriel growled, his voice dropping to a lethal octave. "Is that a threat?" Sienna didn't look at Gabriel. She kept her eyes locked on the boys. "It's not a threat," she whispered. "It's a question." She looked at Nico. "Is that where it hurts?" she asked softly. "In the throat? Because you want to speak, but the words are stuck." Nico looked at the plate. He looked at the red dot, the ketchup mark. Then he did the impossible. Nico reached out, dipped his own small finger into the ketchup, and drew a line from the bird's throat to its wing. And then a sound. "Bah!" Nico's voice was rusty, cracked, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. "Bah! Bird!" Gabriel froze, his heart hammered against his ribs like a sledgehammer. He hadn't heard his son's voice in 2 years. "Bird," Nico said again, stronger this time. He looked at his brothers. "Bird!" Matteo nodded frantically. "Bird!" Matteo whispered. Luca grabbed the plate, pulling it closer. "Fly!" Luca rasped. 3 words in 30 seconds. after 2 years of silence, expensive therapy, and hypnosis. Gabrielle stared at the waitress. She wasn't smiling. She looked sad. Deeply, profoundly sad. She wiped her hand on a rag. "They aren't mute, Mr. Santoro," Sienna said, her voice devoid of fear but heavy with exhaustion. "They're waiting." "Waiting for what?" Gabrielle managed to choke out. "For someone to speak their language." She turned to leave. "I'll get them some plain pasta. Butter, no green stuff." Gabriel grabbed her wrist. He didn't mean to be aggressive, but the shock had short-circuited his manners. "Wait," he said. "Who are you?" Sienna looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his eyes. "I'm just the waitress, sir. Table 4 needs their risotto." She pulled away and walked back into the kitchen, leaving Gabriel Santoro sitting with 3 children who were suddenly, miraculously, babbling about a bird made of balsamic vinegar. But Gabriel was a man who survived by noticing details, and he had noticed something about her hand when she drew the bird. On the inside of her wrist, covered by cheap foundation that was rubbing off due to the heat of the kitchen, was a scar. It wasn't a normal cut. It was a brand. A small, circular burn mark. Gabriel knew that mark. He had seen it on files of human trafficking victims from Eastern Europe and on the bodies of elite soldiers who had been captured and tortured. "Sal," Gabriel said, not taking his eyes off the kitchen door. "Yeah, boss? Get the car ready, and tell the private investigator to scrap whatever background check he did on Sienna Brooks." Gabriel looked at his sons, who were now eating the ketchup off the plate with their fingers. "I want to know who she really is. Tonight." The penthouse of the Santoro building overlooked Central Park. It was a fortress of glass and steel worth $40 million, yet it felt like a prison. The boys were asleep. For the first time in months, they had gone down without a fight. The breakthrough at the restaurant had exhausted them. Gabriel sat in his study, a glass of 18-year-old scotch in his hand. Across from him sat Victor Cray, his head of intelligence. Victor was a man who could find a needle in a haystack and then tell you who manufactured the needle. "You're not going to like this," Victor said, tossing a manila folder onto the mahogany desk. "Try me," Gabriel said. "She made my sons talk, Victor. I don't care if she's a felon. I want to hire her." "You can't hire a ghost, Gabe." Gabriel opened the folder. It was thin, too thin. "Sienna Brooks," Victor recited. "Social Security number issued 3 years ago in Ohio. Driver's license from Florida. Employment history. Diner in Jersey. Bar in Queens. Now Luigi's." "So? She moves around." "Gabe, the Social Security number belongs to a girl who died in a car crash in 1998. Gabriel looked up sharply. "She's living on a stolen ID. And not a good one. It's sloppy. Like she wants to stay under the radar but doesn't have the resources to do it professionally. But here is the kicker." Victor pulled out a grainy photo. It was a CCTV still from a gas station in Chicago, dated 4 years ago. Facial recognition got a hit on this. It's her. Look at the neck. Gabriel squinted at the photo. The woman in the picture was younger, her hair shorter, military cut. She was wearing a tank top. On her neck was a tattoo, a black sun. "The Black Sun Syndicate?" Gabriel asked, his blood running cold. "The Russian mercenaries?" "No," Victor shook his head. "The tattoo is covered up now. She burned it off. See the scar on her neck in the restaurant footage?" Victor leaned in. "I ran her biometrics against the Interpol Red Notice database. Nothing. But then I ran it against the classified database, the one we bought from that hacker in DC. And her name isn't Sienna Brooks. Her name is Alessandra Alex Volkov. She's the daughter of Nikolai Volkov." Gabriel stood up so fast his chair tipped over. Nikolai Volkov, the butcher of St. Petersburg. The man who had tried to move into New York 5 years ago. The man Gabriel's father had killed in a turf war. "Volkov had a daughter?" Gabriel asked. I thought the whole family died in the fire. Everyone thought so. Apparently one survived. She was 17 then. She vanished. Gabriel paced the room. She's a Volkov. That means she's here for revenge. She targeted the boys. If she wanted to kill them, Gabe, she had them alone at the table, Victor pointed out. She didn't hurt them. She made them speak. Why would Volkov's daughter help your children? Maybe to get close to me, Gabriel said, his eyes darkening. To infiltrate. The mark on the plate. The bird. What does it mean? I don't know. But there's something else. We tracked her phone. She lives in a rundown walk-up in the Bronx. But she made a call tonight, right after she left the restaurant. A burner phone. Who did she call? We don't know, but the call lasted 10 seconds, and we traced the receiving signal. Victor paused. It pinged from inside Sing Sing Correctional Facility. Gabriel stared at the city lights. A Volkov princess, living in poverty, using a dead girl's name, helping his sons, and calling a maximum security prison. Bring her in, Gabriel ordered. You want a hit team? No, Gabriel straightened his tie. I want to offer her a job. If she's an enemy, I want her close where I can see her. If she's not, then I need to know why a Volkov is drawing sparrows for my children. And if she refuses? Gabriel picked up the folder and closed it. Nobody refuses me, Victor. Especially not a woman who just made a mistake. What mistake? She showed me she cares about the boys, Gabriel said. That's her weakness, and I'm going to exploit it. Now, Sienna, or Alex, as the file claimed, was walking home when the black SUV pulled up. It was 2 a.m. in the Bronx. The streets were empty. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She simply stopped walking, her body tensing into a combat stance that no waitress should know. The window rolled down. It wasn't a goon. It was Gabriel Santoro himself. Get in, he said. I'd rather walk, she said, her voice steady. It wasn't a request, Miss Brooks, or should I say, Miss Volkov. Her eyes widened, just a fraction. The mask slipped. For a split second, Gabriel saw the terrified girl beneath the soldier's exterior. Then the steel walls slammed back up. You have 3 seconds to get in, Gabriel said, or I send this file to the Russians who are currently looking for the last heir of Nikolai Volkov. I hear they pay well for loose ends. Sienna clenched her jaw. She opened the door and slid into the leather seat. The car smelled of expensive leather and faint cigar smoke. She sat stiffly, hands on her lap. You checked me out, she said. I expected that. I didn't expect you to be this fast. I have resources. Why are you in my city? I live here. Why did you approach my sons? I didn't. You came to my restaurant. Don't play games, Gabriel snapped. You drew that bird. You knew exactly what you were doing. You got a reaction out of them that no doctor has managed in 2 years. How? Sienna looked out the window. Trauma is a language, Mr. Santoro. Your sons aren't broken. They're hiding. They saw something that stole their words. I just showed them that I saw it too. Saw what? She turned to him. The bird, the sparrow. It wasn't just a drawing. It was on the shirt of the man who killed your wife. Gabriel felt the air leave his lungs. What? I was there, she whispered. 2 years ago, I was working catering at the gala where the bomb went off. I saw the man who planted it. He had a tattoo on his neck, a sparrow with a red throat. You saw the killer. Gabriel grabbed her arm. Why didn't you go to the police? Because the police work for the man who hired him, she said bitterly. And because I'm a Volkov. If I walked into a police station, I'd never walk out. Gabriel's mind was racing. His wife's murder had been a cold case, no leads. And here was the witness, serving pasta in the Upper West Side. Who hired him? Gabriel demanded. I don't know his name, I just know the symbol. And I know your sons saw it too. That's why they froze. That's why they don't speak. They are terrified that the Birdman is coming back for them. Gabriel looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the desperation. She was telling the truth. You're going to help me find him, Gabriel said. No, I'm leaving town. Now that you know who I am, I'm dead anyway. You're not leaving, Gabriel said. You're moving in. Sienna laughed, a harsh, dry sound. Excuse me? You're the only one who can get my sons to talk. You're the only witness to my wife's murder. You're going to move into the penthouse. You're going to be their nanny. I'm not a nanny. I'm a fugitive. You're under my protection now, Gabriel declared. I pay you. I protect you. In exchange, you help my sons heal, and you help me hunt down the Birdman. And if I say no, then I open the door and let you walk out here in the Bronx, Gabriel said coldly, and I let the Russians know you're alive. Sienna stared at him. She looked at the lock on the door. She looked at Gabriel's hard, unrelenting face. I have conditions, she said. Name them. Nobody touches me. I get my own lock on my door. And I need to make one phone call a week that you don't trace. The prisoner at Sing Sing? Gabriel asked. Sienna flinched. Yes. Who is he? My brother, she said softly. The one everyone thinks died in the fire. He's serving life for a murder he didn't commit. Gabriel nodded. Done. Welcome to the family, Miss Brooks. The car sped up, heading towards the skyline. Gabriel thought he had just solved his problems. He had no idea he had just invited a Trojan horse into his home, and that the Birdman was closer than either of them realized. The Santoro penthouse was less a home and more a museum of grief. The walls were adorned with modern art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. But there were no family photos. The floors were marble, cold to the touch. Sienna, now officially the nanny, stood in the center of the boys' playroom. It was filled with untouched toys. Rules, Gabriel said, leaning against the doorframe. He had changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, looking less like a mob boss and more like a tired father. But the gun was still visible in his waistband. Rule 1. You are never alone with them outside this room. Rule 2. You don't speak Russian. Ever. Rule 3. You don't leave the building. Sienna picked up a discarded teddy bear. And what about the rule where you tell me why your security system has a blind spot in the service elevator? Gabriel's eyes narrowed. How did you notice that? I spent my childhood hiding from men like you. I look for exits. That elevator has a 30-second delay on the camera feed. Someone tampered with it. Gabriel pulled out his phone immediately, texting Victor. He looked back at her, a strange mix of suspicion and respect on his face. You're useful, Sienna. I'll give you that. I'm not here to be useful. I'm here to fix what you broke. She turned her back on him and knelt before the triplets. They were huddled in the corner, watching her. Matteo held a red crayon. Luca held a blue one. Nico was empty-handed. Okay, Sienna whispered. Dad is leaving. He's big and loud, but he loves you. Say bye. The boys didn't speak. They just waved small hands. Gabriel watched, his throat tight, then turned and left, the breakthrough. Over the next 2 weeks, the penthouse changed. Sienna didn't force the boys to talk. She taught them to whisper. She turned the silence into a game. They were spies, she told them. Spies only spoke when the coast was safe. She used the ketchup technique, but upgraded it. She bought a massive roll of butcher paper and taped it to the marble walls of the hallway, much to the horror of the housekeeping staff. Draw the scary thing, she told them on a rainy Tuesday. Matteo drew a car, Luca drew fire, Nico drew the bird again. But this time he drew a man standing next to the bird. The man had a distinct feature, a cane. Sienna stared at the drawing. Who is the man with the stick, Nico? Nico looked at her, his eyes wide. He tapped the paper. Tap, tap, tap. That night, well past midnight, Sienna went to the kitchen for water. The lights were low. She didn't hear Gabriel enter until he was right behind her. You're up late, his voice rumbled. Sienna jumped, spilling a little water. "You walk too quietly for a big man." "And you don't sleep," Gabriel countered. He walked to the fridge, pouring himself a glass of milk. It was such a domestic action for a man who had ordered 3 hits that morning. "The boys, I heard them laughing today. I was in my office. I heard Matteo laugh." Gabriel looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made Sienna's breath hitch. "Thank you. I'm doing my job. It's more than a job. You look at them like they're yours." Gabriel took a step closer. "The kitchen island was the only thing separating them. And you look at me like I'm a monster." "Aren't you?" Sienna asked, though her voice lacked its usual bite. "I do what is necessary to keep the wolves away." Gabriel reached out, his hand hovering over hers on the countertop. "But when you're in the room, Sienna, the house feels different. Warmer." The air between them crackled. It was dangerous. She was a Volkov, the daughter of his enemy. He was the man who controlled the city that imprisoned her brother. But in that kitchen, under the dim pendant lights, they were just 2 lonely people haunted by ghosts. "Nico drew something today," Sienna said, breaking the spell. She needed to focus. "A man with a cane. Was there a man with a cane at the gala where your wife died?" Gabriel pulled his hand back, the moment shattered. His face hardened into stone. "A cane?" Gabriel frowned. "No. No one in my inner circle uses a cane. My father did, before he died. But that was years ago. Nico remembers it specifically. He drew the cane, silver, with a head on it." Gabriel went to the liquor cabinet and poured a shot of whiskey. "There is a man," he said slowly. "Arthur Penhaligon. He's a real estate mogul. He finances some of our construction deals. He walks with a silver-handled cane, but Arthur is 70 years old. He's a civilian. He has no reason to hurt Isabella." "Civilian or not," Sienna said, "Nico saw him. And if Nico saw him, then Arthur knows the boys are witnesses." Gabriel smashed the shot glass into the sink. "The charity ball," he muttered. "What?" "The Metropolitan Charity Ball is tomorrow night. Arthur is the guest of honor." Gabriel turned to her. "You're coming with me?" "I don't have a dress." "I'm Gabriel Santoro," he said, pulling out his phone. "You'll have 50 dresses by morning. Get some sleep, Sienna. Tomorrow, we go hunting." The Metropolitan Charity Ball was held at the Pierre Hotel. It was a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and fake smiles. Sienna stepped out of the limousine, and the paparazzi went wild. She was wearing a floor-length gown of emerald green silk, backless, that clung to her athletic frame like a second skin. She wore diamond earrings that cost more than the neighborhood she grew up in. Gabriel offered her his arm. He looked devastating in a midnight blue tuxedo, but his eyes were scanning the perimeter, counting exits, analyzing threats. "Stay close," he murmured into her ear, his hand firm on her lower back. "If I squeeze your waist, you drop to the floor. Understood?" "I know how to duck, Gabriel." They entered the ballroom. It was opulent, gold leaf ceilings reflecting the light of 1,000 candles. Sienna felt exposed. She was a fugitive hiding in plain sight on the arm of the most dangerous man in New York. "There," Gabriel whispered. Across the room, surrounded by sycophants, was Arthur Penhaligon. He was an elderly man, frail-looking, leaning heavily on a cane with a silver lion's head handle. "He looks harmless," Sienna whispered. "The devil usually does." They began to mingle. Gabriel played the part of the charming donor, introducing Sienna simply as his associate. Every time they moved closer to Arthur, the crowd seemed to thicken. Then Sienna saw it. She was grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing tray when she locked eyes with a man standing by the service entrance. He was dressed as security, wearing an earpiece. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at Gabriel, and on his neck, just peeking out from the collar of his shirt, was a flash of ink, a red wing. Sienna froze. It was him, the Sparrow. She grabbed Gabriel's arm, digging her nails in. "Gabriel, 3 o'clock, the guard by the kitchen." Gabriel didn't look immediately. He laughed at a joke someone made, took a sip of his drink, and then casually scanned the room. "I see him," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "That's Kalen. He's a freelancer, high-end mercenary." "He's the one," Sienna hissed. "He planted the bomb." "Victor," Gabriel spoke into his cufflink microphone. "Target identified. East exit. We take him alive." Suddenly the lights in the ballroom flickered. "It's a trap," Sienna said, her instincts screaming. "Gabriel, get down." Pop, pop. Silenced gunshots. The champagne flute in Sienna's hand shattered. Panic erupted. Screams filled the hall as the wealthy elite scrambled over each other. Gabriel tackled Sienna, shielding her body with his own as they crashed behind an ice sculpture table. "They knew we were coming!" Gabriel shouted over the noise. "Someone tipped them off! The cane!" Sienna yelled, pointing. Through the chaos, Arthur Penhaligon wasn't running. He was being escorted out by the security guard. Kalen. Arthur wasn't limping anymore. He was moving fast, flanked by 3 other armed men. "He's not crippled," Sienna realized. "It's an act." Gabriel pulled his gun, a sleek 9mm he had smuggled in. "Stay here." "Like hell," Sienna snapped. She hiked up her dress, kicked off her heels, and grabbed a steak knife from the overturned table. They moved together, a seamless unit. Gabriel laid down, suppressing fire, dropping one of Arthur's guards. Sienna moved low, using the panic as cover. They burst into the hotel kitchen. It was chaos, chefs screaming, pots clanging. Kalen was shoving Arthur toward the loading dock. "Kalen!" Gabriel roared. The mercenary spun around, raising a submachine gun. Gabriel fired first. The bullet took Kalen in the shoulder, spinning him around. He dropped the gun but scrambled towards the exit. Arthur Penhaligon turned. He looked at Gabriel, and a cold, cruel smile spread across his face. "You were always too emotional, Gabriel," Arthur said. "Just like your father." Arthur stepped into a waiting black van. Kalen dove in after him. Gabriel ran for the door, but the van screeched away, tires smoking. Gabriel stood panting in the alleyway, the rain soaking his tuxedo. He slammed his fist against the brick wall. "We lost them." "No," Sienna said, walking up behind him. She was holding something. It was the silver-handled cane. Arthur had dropped it in his haste. "We have this," Sienna said. Gabriel took the cane. He unscrewed the silver lion head. It was hollow. Inside there was a small, rolled-up slip of paper. Gabriel unrolled it. It wasn't a code. It was a receipt, a bank transfer confirmation. To the Sparrow Fund, from D. Santoro Gabriel went pale. He leaned against the wall, looking like he had been punched in the gut. "D. Santoro," Sienna read over his shoulder. "Who is D. Santoro?" Gabriel closed his eyes. "Dante." "Who is Dante?" "My uncle," Gabriel whispered, his voice breaking. "Dante Santoro. He raised me after my father died. He's the one who runs the family trust. He's the only one who has the codes to the security at the penthouse." Sienna's blood ran cold. "Gabriel. The boys. If Dante is the one behind Arthur, if Dante ordered the hit on Isabella..." Gabriel's eyes snapped open, filled with pure terror. "He's at the penthouse right now. He said he would stop by to check on them while we were at the gala." "We have to go!" Sienna screamed, already running toward the main road. "Now!" The race home Big Sal drove the Escalade like a tank, smashing through traffic. Gabriel was on the phone, screaming at his security team at the penthouse, but no one was answering. "Lines are cut," Gabriel said, loading a fresh magazine into his gun. "He's scrubbing the house." Sienna sat in the back, her hands shaking. She wasn't shaking from fear for herself. She was thinking of Nico, Luca, and Matteo. "If he touches them," Sienna whispered, "I will burn this city down." "He won't touch them," Gabriel said, though he didn't sound convinced. "He needs them. They are the heirs. He likely wants custody. If I die, he becomes their legal guardian. He gets the empire." The car screeched to a halt in front of the Santoro building. The lobby was dark. The doorman was missing. "Sal, stay with the car," Gabriel ordered. "Sienna, stay behind me." They took the stairs. 30 flights. By the time they reached the penthouse, their lungs were burning. The front door was ajar. Gabriel kicked it open, gun raised. "Dante!" Silence. The living room was trashed, vases shattered, furniture overturned. "Boys!" Sienna screamed, running toward the hallway. They reached the nursery. The door was wide open. The beds were empty. But they weren't gone. Sitting in the middle of the floor was Dante Santoro. He was holding a glass of Gabriel's scotch. He looked calm, almost bored. And in front of him, sitting in a row on the floor, were the triplets. They were terrified, tears streaming down their faces, but they were silent. Standing behind Dante were 3 armed men. "Hello, Gabriel," Dante said, swirling his drink. "You left the party early." "Shame. Arthur was just getting started." "Get away from my sons." Gabriel pointed the gun at his uncle's head. "Put the gun down, nephew," Dante said lazily, "or my men will turn this nursery into a slaughterhouse." "Last." Gabriel hesitated. He couldn't risk a crossfire. Slowly he lowered the gun. "Why?" Gabriel asked. "Why Isabella?" "Because she was soft," Dante spat. "She was making you soft. You were talking about going legitimate. Leaving the life. The Santoro Empire was built on blood, Gabriel. I wasn't going to let you turn it into a charity organization." Dante stood up. "And these boys, they are broken. Broken by what they saw. They are useless to the family. I'm going to do what you didn't have the stomach to do. I'm going to clean the slate. Start fresh." One of the guards stepped toward Matteo. "No!" Sienna lunged forward. A guard backhanded her, sending her crashing into the wall. She slumped to the floor, dazed. "Don't touch her!" Gabriel roared, stepping forward, but 2 guards held him back. Dante looked at the boys. "Say goodbye to your father, little ghosts." And then a small voice cut through the tension. High, clear, angry. "No!" Dante froze. He looked down. It was Matteo. He stood up. He wasn't looking at his shoes. He was looking Dante in the eye. "Bad man," Matteo said. Then Luca stood up. "Bad." Then Nico. "Birdman. Bad." The triplets weren't just speaking. They were accusing. Dante laughed nervously. "So they can talk. Doesn't matter." "It matters," Sienna said, wiping blood from her lip as she stood up. She was smiling, a terrifying Volkov smile. "Why?" Dante asked. "Because," Sienna said, pointing to the ceiling, "while you were monologuing, you forgot to check the baby monitor." Dante looked at the monitor on the shelf. The red light was blinking. Live stream. "I set it up weeks ago," Sienna said. "It broadcasts directly to a cloud server, and to Victor's phone, and to the NYPD private server." Dante's face went white. "Every word you just said," Gabriel said, a dark grin spreading across his face, "is already recorded. You're done, Dante." Dante snarled. "Kill them! Kill them all!" The guards raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the window of the penthouse exploded inward. The world didn't end with a whimper. It ended with a concussion grenade. 1 second, the penthouse was filled with the suffocating tension of Dante's ultimatum. The next, the floor-to-ceiling reinforced glass overlooking Central Park. Glass rated to withstand a hurricane, vaporized into 1,000,000 glittering diamonds. The sound wasn't just a noise. It was a physical blow that slammed into the chest, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Through the swirling vortex of smoke and winter air, 3 black-clad figures swung inward on rappel lines, their boots hitting the marble floor with the heavy thud of tactical precision. "Police! Get down! Get down!" It was a lie, of course. They weren't police. They were Victor Cray's extraction team, Ghost Squad. Men who didn't carry badges, only high-caliber rifles, and a license to erase problems. The blast had done its job. Dante's 3 guards were disoriented, stumbling backward, hands instinctively flying to their ears. That momentary lapse in judgment was the only opening Gabriel Santoro needed. He didn't reach for his weapon immediately. His first instinct was primal, overriding every scrap of strategic training he possessed. The boys. Gabriel launched himself at the nearest guard, a hulking man standing dangerously close to Luca. Gabriel hit him with the force of a battering ram, his shoulder driving into the man's sternum. The impact was audible, a wet crunch of bone. They crashed into a display table, sending a priceless Ming vase shattering across the floor. Gabriel didn't stop. He was a wild animal, raining blows down on the man's face, possessed by a father's terrifying rage. Across the room, Sienna was moving. The Volkov training, suppressed for a decade under the guise of a weary waitress, surged back with lethal clarity. She didn't scream. She didn't hesitate. She flowed like water. The guard who had struck her earlier was raising his submachine gun, sweeping the barrel towards the terrified triplets. He never made it. Sienna slid across the polished floor in her emerald gown, kicking his legs out from under him. As he fell, she didn't scramble away. She twisted, grabbing the fallen pistol from his belt in one fluid motion. She rose to a crouch, the gun leveled. Bang, bang, 2 shots. The guard went still. "Matteo, Luca, Nico!" Sienna's voice cut through the ringing in their ears, sharp and commanding. "Protocol 0, the castle, now!" It was a game they had played a dozen times in the nursery. The castle was the reinforced panic space hidden behind the mahogany bookshelf, a steel-lined closet designed for this exact nightmare. For a heartbeat, the boys were frozen, their wide eyes reflecting the chaos. Then training kicked in. Matteo, the leader, grabbed Nico's wrist. Luca grabbed Matteo's shirt. They moved as a unit, low to the ground, scrambling over the debris of their ruined childhood home. "Stop them!" Dante screamed. He was on his knees, crawling backward over the shards of glass, his face a mask of sweaty desperation. "Kill them! If I go down, the bloodline ends tonight." The last remaining guard, a mercenary named Weaver, who was standing near the kitchen island, panicked. He realized there was no way out. The tactical team was swarming the entrance. He swung his rifle not at the soldiers, but at the fleeing children. He wanted a hostage, or a casualty. Gabriel saw it. He was 20 feet away, tangled with the unconscious guard. "No!" he roared, a sound that ripped his throat raw. He lunged, but he knew, with the sickening, mathematical certainty of a marksman, that he was too slow. But Sienna wasn't. She saw the barrel traverse. She saw the line of fire. She saw Nico's small back as he scrambled for the panel. She didn't fire. She ran. Sienna threw herself across the open space of the living room. It was a suicide move, a desperate, physics-defying leap into the void. Crack. The sound of the rifle was different from the pistol. It was a thunderclap. Sienna's body jerked violently in midair, as if she had been yanked back by an invisible wire. She crashed onto the floor, sliding, skidding on the marble, coming to a halt just inches from the boy's feet. Silence. For 1 second, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then the tactical team terminated the threat. Weaver dropped, neutralized by 3 synchronized shots from the entry team. "Clear! Room clear! Secure the HVI! Subject down!" The shouts were professional, clipped, efficient. But to Gabriel, they sounded like they were coming from underwater. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the blood dripping from his own knuckles. He didn't look at Dante, who was currently being zip-tied and shoved face first into the floor by Victor. Gabriel ran to the center of the room. Sienna was lying on her side. The emerald silk of her dress was no longer green. A dark, viscous stain was spreading rapidly across her midsection, soaking into the white rug beneath her. "Sienna!" Gabriel fell to his knees, his hands hovering over her, terrified to touch, terrified not to. She coughed, a wet, hacking sound that brought a bubble of blood to her lips. Her eyes were fluttering, losing focus. The vibrant green was dulling to a hazy grey. "The boys," she wheezed, her hand grasping weakly at his sleeve. "They're safe," Gabriel choked out, ripping off his tuxedo jacket. He balled it up, pressing it hard against the wound in her side. "They're safe because of you. Stay with me, Alex. Do not close your eyes." "Don't call me Alex," she whispered, a faint, pained smile ghosting her lips. "I hate that name." "Sienna, stay with me, Sienna," Gabriel shouted over his shoulder, his voice cracking. "Medic!" I need a medic in here now. The hidden panel of the bookcase slid open slowly. Gabriel froze. He wanted to scream at them to stay back, to not see this, to not see the woman who had brought them back to life bleeding out on the floor. But the triplets stepped out. They didn't look at the shattered window. They didn't look at the soldiers. They didn't look at their Uncle Dante, who was being dragged out in handcuffs, screaming obscenities. They looked at the blood. Nico began to tremble. Luca covered his mouth, but Matteo walked forward. His face wasn't fearful. It was furious. He knelt beside Gabriel, his small knees sinking into the blood-stained rug. He reached out and placed a small hand on Sienna's cheek. "Sienna," Matteo said. His voice was no longer a whisper. It was loud, clear. "Open eyes." Sienna's lashes fluttered. She forced her eyes open, locking onto the boy. "Hi, sweetie," she gasped. "No sleep," Luca said, stepping up beside his brother. He grabbed her hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. "No sleep, Sienna." Nico, the sensitive soul, the one who had drawn the bird in the cage, stepped forward. He didn't speak to Sienna. He turned to the tactical medic who had just sprinted into the room, a heavy trauma bag in his hand. Nico pointed a shaking finger at the medic, then at Sienna. "Fix!" Nico commanded. The room went silent. The tactical team, the hardened killers, stopped. "Fix her!" Nico screamed, his voice breaking into a sob. "Fix her now!" The medic, a former Navy corpsman who had seen war zones, looked stunned for a fraction of a second before dropping to his knees. "I'm on it, son! I'm on it!" Gabriel wrapped his arm around his sons, pulling them into a tight huddle against his chest, but he didn't pull them away. He couldn't. They were part of this. They were grounding her. "BP is dropping!" the medic shouted, cutting Sienna's dress open to pack the wound. "It missed the lung, but she's losing volume fast. We need to move, now." Gabriel scooped Sienna up into his arms. She was terrifyingly light. Her head lulled against his shoulder, her blood soaking through his white dress shirt, mingling with his sweat. "Victor," Gabriel said, his voice cold as the grave. He didn't look back at the room. "Yes, boss?" "Burn it," Gabriel said. "Burn everything in this apartment. I never want to step foot in this place again. Consider it done." Gabriel carried her out into the hallway, past the shattered doorframe. The triplets ran beside him, 3 small guardians refusing to leave her side. They hurried down the corridor towards the service elevator where the trauma team was waiting with a gurney. As the elevator doors closed, shutting out the wreckage of the penthouse, Gabriel looked down at the woman in his arms. She had come into their lives as a ghost, a waitress with a secret and a bottle of ketchup. She was leaving as the anchor of their souls. Gabriel kissed her forehead, tasting salt and iron. "You don't get to die," he whispered into her hair as the elevator plummeted toward the ground floor. "You signed a contract, remember? You're the nanny. You don't get to quit." Sienna didn't answer, but her hand, limp and cold, twitched against his chest. A squeeze. Faint, weak, but there. It was enough. 6 months later. The snow fell softly on the private garden of the Santoro estate in the Hamptons. It was far away from the grime of the city, far away from the memories of the penthouse. The smell of roasting turkey wafted from the kitchen. Gabriel stood on the porch, watching the yard. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a thick wool sweater and jeans. He looked younger. The lines of stress around his eyes softened. "Telephone," a voice called out. Sienna stepped onto the porch. She moved with her usual grace, though she now favored her left side slightly when it rained. She held out a phone. "It's for you," she said. "The governor." Gabriel took the phone. "Governor," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Yes, I appreciate the update. A retrial? Good. In light of the new evidence provided by the anonymous source? Excellent. I expect he'll be home by Christmas." Gabriel hung up. He looked at Sienna. "Your brother's retrial is approved," he said. "The DNA evidence from the gala. It cleared him. He's coming home, Sienna." Sienna froze. She brought a hand to her mouth, tears welling in those piercing green eyes. She had spent 10 years running, hiding, and fighting, all for this moment. "You did this," she whispered. "No," Gabriel said, stepping closer and wrapping his arms around her waist. "We did this. You gave me my sons back. I gave you your brother. I'd say we're even." "Not quite," she smiled, resting her head on his chest. "I still have to cook dinner for 4 Santoro men. That's a lot of work. I can hire a chef. And let them eat that fancy foam stuff again? No way. They want mac and cheese with hot dogs." Suddenly the back door burst open. "Sienna! Sienna!" Matteo, Luca, and Nico ran out into the snow, bundled in brightly colored parkas. They weren't silent ghosts anymore. They were loud, energetic, chaotic 4-year-olds. "Luca threw a snowball at the cat," Matteo tattled. "Did not," Luca yelled. "It was a snow mouse." "Dad, tell them to stop," Nico shouted, grabbing Gabriel's leg. The noise was deafening. It was overwhelming. It was the most beautiful sound Gabriel had ever heard. He looked down at his sons, then at the woman who had saved them all, with a bottle of ketchup and a little bit of empathy. "Hey," Gabriel said, crouching down. The boys went quiet, looking at him. Gabriel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He looked at Sienna. "I have a question," Gabriel said, "but I need help asking it. I'm not very good with words." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, a vintage emerald, cut to match Sienna's eyes, surrounded by diamonds. "Boys," Gabriel said, "can you help me ask Sienna to stay? Forever?" The triplets looked at the ring. Then they looked at Sienna. Matteo grinned. "Marry Dad!" he shouted. Luca jumped up and down. "Marry us!" Nico walked up to Sienna, tugged on her sweater until she knelt down, and whispered in her ear, "If you stay, I'll draw you a bird. A happy one." Sienna looked at Gabriel. The snow was falling around them, settling on her eyelashes. She didn't see the Mafia Don. She didn't see the dangerous man who had kidnapped her from a diner. She saw the father who loved his children more than life itself. "I don't need a bird," she whispered to Nico, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I have my flock right here." She looked at Gabriel and nodded. "Yes." Gabriel kissed her, deep and passionate, ignoring the chorus of "ew" and "gross" from the boys. As they walked back inside, leaving the cold behind, the camera panned down to the snow-covered patio table. There, abandoned in the excitement, was a paper plate. Drawn on it, in the chocolate syrup, was a picture. It wasn't a sparrow in a cage, it was a nest. Big, messy, and full. And for the Santoro family, the silence was finally, permanently broken. And that is the story of how a simple waitress used a ketchup bottle to unlock the voices of 3 silent children and melt the heart of a ruthless mob boss. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful language isn't spoken, it's felt. Sienna didn't try to fix the boys. She tried to understand them, and in doing so, she found the family she thought she had lost forever. What did you think of Dante's betrayal? And would you have forgiven Gabriel for how he brought Sienna in at the beginning? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart or kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who needs a happy ending today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.